So, hi, my name's Megan, and I work for Little Green Steps WA. So I'm the program manager, and Little Green Steps delivers education for sustainability workshops to teachers. So I've been a teacher for a long time, and I moved into this role. Why I probably chose this role was because it blends lots of aspects of me, so it helps me to actually be the person I am by doing this role. So I get to actually share knowledge of education activities through the ecological footprint of treading lightly on our world, and also through the social handprint of reaching out into community. So learning from and about our First Nations peoples and multicultural society as well. So for me, the reason I love this job is because it gives me meaning and purpose, and it's my way of giving back to our world and also to the people in it. But I also do something else on a part-time basis, and this is really me as well. So I think what you can probably take from my presentation is that sort of we're never entirely one thing, and we can recreate ourselves lots throughout our lives, and we're probably still on a big sort of learning journey of sort of finding careers and pathways that sort of meet the people that we are. So the other thing I do is I run the Museum of Moving Objects with my girlfriend Rashenda. So she and I both started our lives as archaeologists. She continued and is still working as an archaeologist, and I was an archaeologist for about 5 years, and then I moved into teaching. So the Museum of Moving Objects does something that I love doing. It brings history and archaeology to life in schools and communities. And I've been doing this since 2011. I feel really lucky to be able to combine my two passions, and that's of ecological sustainability and looking after our world, and also the importance of learning from the past. So that's I suppose why I love doing both things. Before I talk about MOMO, probably is helpful for you to actually hear how I got to this stage of actually running MOMO and doing ecological sustainability. So there was no clear pathway, as I've said. The big message really is to take opportunities as they arrive, because you never know where things will lead for you. So how I started, I was lucky enough to do a degree in archaeology at Newcastle University in the UK. And my dad always said to me, that's not going to get you a job. And he was wrong, because I got lots of jobs in it. Now, those jobs weren't very long term. So I got lots of archaeology excavation contracts, and I was an assistant curator at Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery. Got a bit of wind here, wrecking my display. But what I really loved about my degree was European prehistory and heritage management. So how to look after the past, and learning about cultural heritage. So when you do a bit of comparison of European prehistory, a lot of the material evidence that you find here in WA of First Nations peoples has got lots of similarity to European prehistory. So that's like a hand knife, okay, with ground edges, and we learnt at university how to actually do that. It's called flint knapping. So we learnt how to make the ground edges. This is an amazing stone tool. These are actually replicas that were used for MOMO. So they were created by an archaeologist who knew how to do flint knapping too. And when we were at university, we studied how to do this. So it was pretty exciting. So this is called a ground edge axe. And the history of these artifacts, the big artifacts from European prehistory and also from Indigenous prehistory, indicate that these are from the Pleistocene age. So they're very old. They're between 10,000 years before present, okay? So that, and then stone tools got much smaller. So they went to something like this. And these are tula adzes. So I'm really lucky because I get to share my passion of archaeology from the past with community through teaching. And that's what MOMO does. We share archaeology and history to schools and communities. So just going back again to my degree. So after I did my degree, I worked as an archaeologist and as a museum curator. It was lots of short-term contracts. And then I decided to take the opportunity. I saw in the Archaeology Abroad that there was a job in WA to work in the Pilbara on a research project, and it was looking at the habitation patterns of First Nations peoples down the Fortescue River. So I worked up there in the Pilbara in quite remote areas for 4 months. So I lived in a swag, which was really exciting. And it was a really amazing experience for a 24-year-old like me. We had to survey places that really didn't look like anybody had walked through them, except for obviously Aboriginal people over thousands of years. So, and we also excavated 3 rock shelters. So for me, it was rather an amazing experience to hear the stories with traditional owners. So we met up with them too, and they shared their stories and they shared their music and they shared their usage of these areas in the recent past too. So we were studying both the very far past through archaeology, and then we were doing anthropological study, hearing the stories of the traditional owners and how they had used the land as jackaroos and jillaroos on site seasonally. So it was a really amazing project, and that really spurred me on to continue doing contract archaeology. So I did that as a field archaeologist for UWA after that. And then came the reality, where do you want to live, Megan? I might have to make a choice as to where I want to go. So a lot of the archaeology jobs were contract, and they were short-term contracts, and you'd move to each job, which was really great thing to do. I really enjoyed it, but I decided to go into teaching because also I loved sharing what I'd learnt. It was just something that I really felt very passionate about. So I moved into teaching, and I taught for many years in geography and history, and then I moved into community education. So I did community service learning at schools as well. And I did that for many years, and I felt that I had quite a lot to bring to that because I'd been working as an archaeologist for quite a few years. So I thought that sort of gave students lots of real life experience too. And then I set up MOMO with my friend Shenda in 2011, which was really a way for me to return to my first love of archaeology, and in a part-time way that will continue now and into the future. So I don't actually see an end in sight. I don't see that I have to have an end to my career, because what I'm doing I can continue to do to keep sharing to schools and communities. And I also have another bonus that I work as the LGS program coordinator for 3 days a week, which I can interrelate with this MOMO experience too. So what do we do with MOMO? We run workshops and we run exhibitions, and we get involved in community excavations. So we run those workshops. I might show you a few things. So here's my shoebox archaeology. This is a history shoebox archaeology, and a maritime shoebox archaeology experience. So we run these for schools and for community groups. We go into aged care homes too. Okay, I'll just show you. There's the sheet that we use. It's called an identikit sheet. So as students with their brushes reveal the artifacts from the past, they can actually study their identikit charts to see what this means. So if you found any black sea glass, you could explore that. But this is a bit exciting, this little find here. So here, this is an example of a white silicate clay pipe, and pipes like this were used from the 1600s in Europe all the way through to the 19th century. They were like our modern day cigarette, if you like. So here's an example of one from the 19th century, and they were thrown away after use. So they originated in the 1600s from China. So when you find things like this, you can do a little bit of research on them. Here's a bullet too, so you get to do a bit of research on your identikit, and you've got lots of different bottles. So we do lots of guess an object. So this is, what would this object be used for? It was an ink pot. So that's one of the things that we do. We do shoebox archaeology, and we do that for historic excavations, and we also do it for Aboriginal excavations. So if I shine this back down again, you can see here's some stone tool assemblages from an archaeology excavation. So the science of archaeology is explored in our workshops too. You can see here's a core, and here's some flakes that have been knocked off the core. So we have various workshops where you get the kids to piece the flakes together, but we also talk about how Aboriginal people created these stone tools, because you'll find evidence, debitage it's called, of stone tool assemblages right across Australia, and how we know that they were made by human hands because they would have had a hammerstone to knock the top off, so this would have slid off, and they had to hit them from a certain place, and they would leave a bowl with percussion. So it was quite a scientific and a very skillful way of making stone tools. we know it was skillful because we lost lots of skin on our hands when we were doing it at university, learning how to make stone tools. It was actually very hard to do. So we actually run some of these activities in our workshops, and we do it with shells, because in the Kimberley, a lot of traditional owners didn't have stone tools to work with, but they had hard shell. They were bivalves, and so they would also get a hammer stone, and they'd chip the end off these, and they'd embed them into a stick, into a haft with glue. This is called a codger from down south. And they would make stone tools, hammer stones, and knives to use with shells. So we do this activity with kids too. So we have lots of fun doing all our shoebox archaeology and community workshops. We also work with the elderly. So these are our intergenerational workshops. We've had loads of fun doing this. We've worked with school children to record oral histories of elderly people in aged care homes, and we've put on exhibitions. So we've put on 2, great women by great girls and great men by great boys. And we got year 9 boys at CBC to interview 10 great men, and they learned how to interview, so they learned how to ask open-ended questions, and then they learned how to record with IT, and then they learned how to transfer that information into the written with pictures to create an exhibition panel. Okay, we also recorded the men as well, so it was a really embedded experience. For some of these boys, it made lifelong friendships with these men. So 2 boys I know of stayed friendly with their great man until that man unfortunately passed away, and for them, that person became a role model. So it was a very inspiring and important project to us to actually work with the elderly. And from that, we have done quite a lot of workshops into aged care homes, and we do object bingo, and we do guess the object, and we do Granny's Glory Box, and we share maritime archaeology workshops with the elderly too. So we have lots of fun doing all of those sorts of things too. We do lots of community education too. So this was one we did. We did a workshop on the history of chocolate, which is always very exciting. And then we explored some South American archaeological excavations that my partner Rashenda had been on. So we've had lots of fun doing these things, and we get involved in community education, community excavation as well. So our recent excavation was with the city of Fremantle. They were searching for the footings of this old church, St John's Church. So 2 years ago in January, we had a community excavation project where King Square is, and the city of Fremantle wanted to find the footings of St John's Church. It wasn't there for very long, and the church that is there in King Square is not this one. So this one was facing a totally different way. The city of Fremantle was pulling down their 70s building, town council building, and they got archaeologists in to do 3 community excavations. So one of them was to look for the church footings. 2, we actually found an old blacksmith. We found loads of horseshoes there. And so we would run tours of the site for the public, and we ran lots of community workshops. So we ran, for the littlies, we ran dig it before you can spell it workshops. We ran mini excavation in a shoebox. We did some real finds assistant work on site with adults, and we did some fun workshops too. So we did creative reuse with unprovenanced artifacts workshops. So that's making jewellery, and we made mobiles too. So we've had some really fun experiences in there that really bring archaeology and history to life to schools and communities. So I'd like to finish by doing a bit of a guess the object with you, just for a little bit of fun. Okay, this is something that you would have used as a teenager. You would have bought from the shop as a teenager, probably, I'm trying to guess the date actually. Well, probably in the last 80 years, so 80 years ago. What do you think this is? Something you would have really enjoyed. Okay, they were stored like this upside down because they had lots of fizz in them. Okay, and the glass was pinched by a machine. Okay, and it was sealed with a marble. So it's a soft drink bottle. It's your old lemonade bottle, okay, from the past. So we were very creative reusers, okay. We weren't using anything like plastic. And this is how you would have bought a soft drink. I think it was probably at the turn of the century. So we do lots of fun things like that. I hope you enjoyed my little presentation on what I do. You can see I don't sort of see it as purely as a career. I see it as an extension of me. It's something I love doing. And all I can say to you is, when you find something you really like to do, you can make it be something you want it to be by just taking the opportunities that come along and running with them. So don't be too scared if things don't work out, because that's the joy of life. Some things are going to work out really well and some might have an end in sight, but you just recreate yourself and move on, because that's how I view what I'm doing at the moment. It's all part of me, and it's worth doing. Thanks for listening.